Naomi Ellis walked into the grand lobby of the Bellevue Hotel with confidence and elegance that made every gaze around her pause. An emerald satin gown hugged her graceful frame. Her hair was neatly pinned in a high bun, and her heels glided across the marble floor in a rhythm that exuded authority. She wasn't just the only daughter of Thurgood Ellis, a Wall Street investment legend, but also a financial strategist, known for pulling corporations back from the edge of collapse. Yet behind that flawless exterior, something in her eyes seemed on the verge of breaking. Tonight's charity gala was no stranger to Naomi, a place of calculated handshakes wrapped in probing smiles, where congratulations often sounded like unsigned contracts. In a space heavy with the scent of champagne and luxury perfumes, Naomi moved among groups of guests, like a swan on a lake, graceful but solitary. She had often wondered how many of those looks were truly meant for her, and how many were just drawn to the Ellis on her name badge. Just as Naomi reached for a glass of wine from a passing waiter, a warm male voice spoke behind her. "Naomi Ellis, they say you're a legend, but they still underestimate you." She turned to meet the gaze of Darius Langston, a man who looked entirely different from the polished crowd around him. He had no tie, no pretension, just a well-fitted suit, and a look in his eyes that blended confidence with a hint of challenge. Darius introduced himself as an architect from Atlanta, specializing in public spaces, a man passionate about restoring what has been forgotten. Naomi was unexpectedly drawn to him, not because of his appearance, but because she felt for the first time in a long time that someone saw her. Not her name, not her legacy, but the person behind it all. They talked for hours that night about art cities and beliefs. For the first time in years, Naomi found herself laughing without restraint. Darius never asked about her father, and never mentioned her job or family background. It was just two people, a conversation, and a strangely weightless feeling. But even at that moment, Naomi didn't know that tender gaze would become a shackle, those compliments a tool of manipulation, and the name Darius Langston, once seeming like salvation, would mark the beginning of a long nightmare. In the following weeks, Darius Langston felt like a strange wind that swept away all the rules that had always governed Naomi's life. He didn't hesitate to show up outside her office with a cup of black coffee and a handwritten note. "For Wall Street's queen, don't forget to hydrate." He sent her sketches of his unfinished architectural projects and shared his passion for designing living spaces for low-income communities. He listened intently to Naomi's concerns about green investments and bluntly criticized those who leech off the outdated financial system. To Naomi, Darius was a splash of cold water in the desert of high society. He didn't seek to steal the spotlight, or at least, that's what she thought. Every man who had ever entered her life had looked at her with calculating eyes. Who she was, what shares she held, which politicians she knew, but not Darius. He made her laugh, made her speak honestly, and most importantly, made her believe she was loved for who she truly was. Since their Stanford days, Angela, Naomi's best friend, wasn't so easily swept away by the whirlwind. "Naomi," Angela said during a weekend brunch, "I know you're happy, but don't you think he showed up a little too fast? Too perfect, too eager, too available?" Naomi laughed it off, her eyes sparkling in the sunlight. "Not everyone who comes close has an agenda. Maybe I'm just lucky." Angela didn't respond. She only stared at the mimosa in her friend's hand, as if it contained the warning sign Naomi refused to see. Everything escalated quickly. Within 6 months, Darius had moved into Naomi's 300-square-meter penthouse in Midtown Manhattan. He picked her up after work and suggested she try yoga instead of working on reports at 2 a.m. Naomi, long accustomed to solitude and self-sufficiency, found herself softening. A part of her was afraid she was becoming dependent. But another part of my thought is that maybe this is what ordinary people mean when they say they're in love. Then came the proposal. Darius got down on one knee during a simple dinner at home. No candles, No classical music. Just the two of them. A vivid blue sapphire ring and the words that left Naomi speechless. I don't need Ellis's name. I need you. And Naomi said yes. She didn't know that beyond that cozy scene, Darius had already begun weaving his web-raising capital through her industry contacts, pitching projects to investors who had hesitated to even meet with him. Every handshake and every toast came with the exact simple phrase, I'm Naomi Ellis's fiancé. She thought she was stepping into a dream, but in truth, she was stepping deeper into a game of chess, where she was the most valuable pawn on the board. Naomi and Darius's honeymoon began in Venice. For her, it was a childhood dream. Gondola rides under the setting sun, violin melodies echoing from behind old wooden windows, and glasses of bold Italian wine burning like fire. At first, Darius was truly charming. He carried her up narrow staircases, told funny stories, and listened as she spoke about childhood memories, following her father to the NYSE trading floor, learning finance at the kitchen table with her mother. But on the third night, something shifted. Naomi chose a striking red dress, elegant form-fitting, birthday gift from her mother for her 30th. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Darius looked up from his cocktail and smiled. But his following words changed the air. You look beautiful. But that dress is a bit much. Everyone's going to stare. Naomi paused. What do you mean? Just that you don't need to show off like this to impress people. I prefer you more understated. The words were soft, but like a velvet-wrapped blade, Naomi gave a faint smile and changed dresses. Still something inside her stirred. Uncertain, blurry. Remarks like that began to increase. One day after Naomi had a friendly chat with a local chef, Darius whispered as they left the restaurant, Did you need to be that friendly with a stranger? It made me uncomfortable. Naomi pushed back. It's called being polite. Darius was silent for a moment, then smiled. Maybe I'm just a bit old-fashioned. I want to keep you to myself. She said nothing, unsure whether to feel loved or control. Back in New York, the mask began to crack. One evening, Naomi enthusiastically shared a new initiative at her firm, a micro-investment model for women of color in low-income areas. She was radiant, passionate, still holding the schematic. Darius sipped his wine, eyes fixed on his phone. Sounds exhausting. You don't need to do all that. Money's not an issue. Naomi froze. It's not about money. I'm doing this because I believe in it. Darius shrugged. I think you're doing it to prove something to someone, not because you truly want to. The words hit like a nail through the heart. She fell silent for the rest of dinner, watching the candlelight flicker across the face of the man who once made her feel understood. Now, he only made her feel small. Naomi discovered something else a few days later. Their joint account began to show unexplained withdrawals. Darius always had a reason. I'm investing in a new restaurant chain. You'll see. But there were no reports, no contracts, no confirmations. When she gently brought up managing finances jointly, Darius snapped. You don't trust me, or do you think only you know how to handle money? Did you marry me or a CPA? Naomi said nothing. Part of her wanted to believe, but another part that had analyzed thousands of lines of data and uncovered countless financial frauds began to sound an alarm. An alarm that love made her momentarily ignore. But numbers don't lie, and the instincts of a woman who once led billion-dollar deals could not stay silenced forever by sweet nothings. On the morning of her wedding, Naomi stood before the mirror in a room bathed in soft golden light. Mermaid-cut white gown hugged the strong figure of a financial strategist unaccustomed to softness. Her natural curls were pinned up loosely, exposing her elegant neckline. Her eyes, though expertly done by one of New York's top makeup artists, still reflected something else. Hesitation. Her mother, Beatrice, entered the room, a composed, seasoned woman who had built the third largest insurance company in Atlanta from scratch. She didn't say much, only gently asked, "Are you sure?" Naomi tried to smile. "Just nerves." "Mom." Beatrice studied her daughter for a long moment, then softly said, "A man who truly loves you won't make you feel like you have to defend yourself in the very relationship you're in." Naomi looked up, lips pressed together. Not because her mother was wrong, but because she was too right. The ceremony took place in the rooftop garden of the Grand Bellamy Hotel, Naomi's choice, not just for its beauty, but for its privacy. From the 32nd floor, Manhattan stretched like an endless ribbon of light. The guests were a who's who: investors, politicians, artists, and leaders of global philanthropic funds. Darius arrived in a tailored Italian tuxedo, his smile perfect, his poise polished like a seasoned CEO. But Naomi noticed something strange. Every greeting he gave came with an agenda. Every handshake carried a promise of a big deal, an architectural project with real potential, and a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. Suddenly she understood today, for Darius wasn't a wedding. It was a disguised shareholder meeting. That evening, while the cocktail reception was winding down, Naomi saw him standing in a secluded corner with two unfamiliar men. She caught a fragment of the conversation. "She holds more shares than most people realize. If we're careful, we could—" Naomi's heart pounded. She turned away, trying to stay composed. But the seed of suspicion had already rooted itself in her mind. This time, not just about love, but a looming financial war. After all the guests had left on their wedding night, she lay silently next to Darius, in one of Manhattan's most luxurious penthouses. He wrapped an arm around her and whispered, "You know, my life begins today." Naomi gave a soft laugh and replied, "And I'm wondering if I just signed a contract or chained myself to a debt." Darius laughed heartily, thinking she was joking. Naomi wasn't. Beneath the golden light, casting shadows across the ceiling, she saw her reflection sinking into something colder than darkness. And for the first time in her life, Naomi Ellis, the woman who had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions, felt like she had missed the one clause she should have read more carefully: the security of her own heart. Naomi had always controlled her life meetings, scheduled to the minute, budgets calculated to the cent, and emotions tucked neatly beneath the polished shell of pure professionalism. But ever since the wedding, something felt off, and it began with the most minor things. An email from the bank alerted her of a $25,000 withdrawal from the joint account, something Naomi had never authorized. A luxury hotel bill in Miami, while Darius had said he was on a business trip in Chicago. A credit card reminder for a Richard Mille watch 1. Naomi had never seen on her husband's wrist. At first, she made excuses. Maybe he's investing. It could be a gift for a partner. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive. But maybe wasn't enough for someone who had analyzed the financial reports of the biggest corporations in America. One night after Darius fell deeply asleep, Naomi quietly pulled her MacBook from her handbag, launched a private VPN, and logged into the family's financial dashboard, a system she had built after their wedding. As soon as the password was entered, the figures appeared, and numbers don't lie. She discovered a hidden account opened under an unfamiliar legal entity with numerous masked transactions from the joint account, her secondary credit card, and satellite investment portfolios. What is the total amount withdrawn? Nearly $1.2 million in just the 4 months since the wedding. She dug deeper and found transfers to crypto wallets, risky investments into shell companies in Panama and Dubai, and one recurring name in the transaction logs: Aurelia M. No clear identity. Naomi froze. This wasn't careless spending. This was a systematic siphoning campaign. A strategic extraction plan was likely crafted before the wedding even took place. And the man lying next to her each night, Darius Langston, might not just be an opportunist. He could be a master-level con artist. The next morning, Naomi said nothing. She ate breakfast as usual, letting Darius kiss her on the cheek. But her eyes were no longer soft. They were cold. They were awake. She began collecting evidence. I emailed her attorney outside the company's network. I booked a cybersecurity consultant under an alias, screenshot every transaction, every text message, every invoice. On another night, as Darius stepped out of the bathroom, Naomi sat reading a book, The Sociopath Next Door. Its cover flipped upright deliberately. Darius chuckled and asked, "What's that about?" Naomi replied without looking up, "About people who can destroy someone's life without blinking." Darius paused for a second, then laughed. "Sounds like a horror movie." Naomi smiled slightly. "Maybe. But not every movie is fiction." In the quiet of the night, as the apartment fell still again, Naomi opened her phone and saved the final file to a secure drive labeled Phase 1, Truth. She knew she couldn't act just yet. To escape a game directed by someone else, she would have to be the one rewriting the script. From now on, every move had to be flawlessly precise. Naomi began to see everything through a different pair of eyes. Darius's smile each morning suddenly resembled a crack. His sweet words now sounded like duct tape, concealing something rotten underneath. He was no longer the charming husband who once made her heart flutter on a rooftop gala. He was now a hunter, and Naomi who had once been the prey. But now it was different. Now she was prey, who knew she was being hunted. The first change was his gaze. Darius began to grow suspicious. He checked her phone more often, justifying it as being worried about hackers. He asked why she came home, late, dressed too plain for dinner that night, and seemed distant during their conversations. One time when Naomi locked a confidential file using an encrypted USB drive, Darius waited until she was asleep to sneak it from her purse. But when he plugged it into the laptop, a message appeared. "How desperate must you be to touch another's secrets?" Darius went pale, still lying in bed, her back turned toward him, and Naomi opened her eyes. She said nothing, but she knew. A few days later, Naomi pretended to forget her wallet at home and asked Darius to pay for dinner at an upscale French restaurant. His gaze flickered. "Ah, I forgot my card. You know me. I rarely carry cash." Naomi tilted her head, her smile soft. "Then you could ask your assistant to wire the money. Surely a big-time developer like you isn't out of funds." A minute of silence. Then Darius laughed loudly. "You're always joking, Naomi. All right, next time it's on me." But Naomi knew this wasn't forgetfulness. This was a test, and Darius was losing control. A few days later, Naomi hired a private investigator, Marcus Fan, a former financial agent who had worked with the SEC. Just 3 days and Marcus returned with a file, a Darius account in the Cayman Islands, a shell company in Belize. The CEO is Aurelia Maynard. Leaked emails between Darius and Aurelia, discussing phased siphoning plans and a clean exit path. Naomi slowly flipped through each page. No expression. Then she asked, "I need to know if I disappeared just for 24 hours. Could Darius find me?" Marcus looked at her, then replied, "Not if you leave no digital trace. But if you leak even a little emotion, yes." Naomi nodded. "Then help me write a vanishing script, but only so I can reappear, once he has nowhere left to run." While Darius continued playing the model husband, still picking Naomi up in a luxury car after work, still sending flowers to her office with notes that read, "To my one and only," still posting happy photos of the two of them online, like nothing could shatter their bliss. Naomi had built a 3-layered plan. 1. Layer 1. Back up all evidence of Darius's financial misconduct. 2. Layer 2. Remove joint account access and transfer untraceable assets into a private trust. 3. Layer 3. Pre-warn the family attorney to be ready. One signal would trigger a whole lawsuit and asset freeze. All of it is done silently. No complaining. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't rage. She calculated. She was no longer the prey. She was the one drawing the bow. And in the center of the living room, under the soft yellow glow, a glass of wine in hand. Naomi looked at her husband, walking in, and smiled. I was just thinking about a vacation. We should go somewhere far, to reset everything. Darius nodded enthusiastically. Paris. Naomi raised her glass. Or Maldives, but in her mind, a very different destination flickered. Manhattan District Court courtroom 3B trial begins. Monday, 8:30 a.m. La Marée, a restaurant. Where reservations are made, months in advance, was no place for scandal. But tonight, Darius Langston would lose control for the first time, and Naomi had already set the stage. Naomi chose a wine-red silk dress, not flashy, not excessive, but enough to make her stand out among the elite crowd. The diamond necklace she wore was a gift from her mother, who once said, "No one can choke you if you always hold your head high." She took her seat. Darius arrived moments later, still dashing in a bespoke suit with that signature half-smile. I thought you'd wear blue. Like always, he said, pouring wine without asking. Naomi smiled faintly. Sometimes a woman must change colors to avoid being defined. Dinner began with a French appetizer. But this wasn't a meal. This was the opening move of a chess match. Darius spoke endlessly about new investment contacts, million-dollar opportunities, and how he was shouldering the family finances. Naomi listened. No objections, no nods. She just watched. Then gently, she set her glass down. Why don't you pay for dinner tonight, Darius? After all your sacrifices, I think letting you shine is only fair. The air froze. Darius stared at her eyes, blinking fast. You're joking. You know I don't carry cards when I dine with you. Naomi tilted her head. I thought you were the man of the house. No card in that. $1, $200 leather wallet. A red flush crept up Darius's face. What are you trying to do here, Naomi? She met his eyes, her tone ice cold for the first time. I'm bringing you to the edge between instinct and identity, and watching which one you choose. Darius stood up abruptly. The red wine glass tipped, crashing into the pristine white tablecloth like a bloodstain. He growled, You think you're better than me. Without the Ellis name, you're nobody. You live off your parents' money, off someone else's reputation. Naomi didn't flinch, eyes locked on his. And you live by bleeding others dry. But too bad this prey has no blood left for you. That line was the final trigger. Darius didn't scream. He didn't hit her. He threw the dessert plate in her face, a strawberry chocolate mousse, splattering across her neck and red silk dress like a massacre. The restaurant fell dead silent. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the air. Naomi calmly wiped her face. I picked up a napkin, stood. You didn't just lose a wife. You just lost your freedom. She turned and walked away. As the revolving doors sealed behind her, a man in a gray suit stood up from the corner of the bar and made a call. Activate Phase 3. Deliver the files to the DA's office. Darius Langston, once the golden groom of the business world, had just publicly assaulted his wife in front of 50 witnesses. That night, a guest video accidentally capturing the scene went viral with the title, Famous CEO Throws Cake in Wife's Face at Luxury Restaurant. The shocking truth behind it all. It reached 1 million views within 10 hours. The game had changed hands. Naomi Ellis was no longer defending. She was leading the counterattack. One day after the incident at La Marée, Darius Langston woke up to over 300 missed calls. Not from friends, not from business partners, but from criminal defense attorneys, crisis, communication managers, and the PR director of his firm. the image of him throwing a dessert plate into Naomi Ellis's face, her expression unflinching, as cream and red mousse smeared her dress, had become an emblem. Across social media, a single phrase went viral. That wasn't a dessert, that was a mask falling off. Naomi, meanwhile, remained entirely silent. No press conference, no social media posts, no rebuttals. Instead, she walked into the office of Clarice Morgan, one of New York's most renowned attorneys in divorce and financial abuse cases. Her voice was as sharp as steel. "I don't just want a divorce," Naomi said. "I want to expose every lie he's ever buried, from hidden accounts, borrowed name assets, to how he leveraged my name for his gain." Clarice raised an eyebrow. "You want to destroy him?" Naomi didn't blink. "No, I want him to destroy himself with the things he thought would protect him." In the next 72 hours, Clarice's team launched a coordinated legal assault. Subpoenas were sent to the Cayman Bank, where Darius had his so-called business trips. Leaked copies of ghost capital contracts Darius had forced Naomi to sign, now reclassified as falsified financial documents. 8. Emotional abuse. Claims filed with video evidence from the restaurant backed by 12 eyewitness testimonies, including a female state senator who happened to be dining there. And just as Darius scrambled to contain the PR inferno, Naomi appeared. Not in a courtroom, not on the news, but on a TED Talk titled "How I Survived Silence: A Journey from Control to Clarity." She never mentioned Darius by name. She spoke only about women, manipulated by emotional coercion, about marriages, where control wears the costume of love, and how successful Black women are often forced to soften themselves just to survive. The auditorium gave her a 4-minute standing ovation. The video hit 2 million views in 2 days. The hashtag Naomi Ellis flooded TikTok and Twitter. Major publications: Forbes, The Atlantic. The Cut ran stories titled, "Naomi Ellis is no longer the wife of a con man. She is the voice of a waking generation." And Darius Company stock plummeted. Investors panicked. A Singaporean firm pulled out of a $180 million deal. Darius called Naomi in desperation. She didn't answer. His final text read, "We're done." Naomi didn't reply. But in Clarice Morgan's office that day, she signed the official lawsuit against Darius Langston for emotional abuse, financial manipulation, fraudulent marital documentation, and beneath her signature, Naomi penned a single line by hand: "Silence once protected you. Now silence will end you." New York State Supreme Court, Courtroom 6. Media were barred from filming, but every eye in the industry was fixed on the case. Ellis versus Langston. A renowned financial strategist, her husband used her reputation to climb the ladder, only to be stepped on once he reached the top. A man once hailed as the most successful young architect of the decade is now accused of abuse, embezzlement, and financial manipulation within marriage. Inside the courtroom, Darius Langston entered with 3 attorneys. He is still wearing his expensive tailored suit, still flashing that confident smile. But his eyes, they no longer held arrogance. They flickered uneasy, as if he was afraid. Across the room, Naomi entered in a simple white suit. No makeup, no lipstick, no performance. She wasn't there to earn sympathy. She was there to reclaim herself. The trial began with evidence presented by attorney Clarice Morgan, bank records showing overlapping transactions between the couple's joint fund and unverified investments. An email from Darius to a friend that read, "As long as she's out there being superwoman, I can siphon money and no one will notice." The restaurant video, Darius throwing a dessert into Naomi's face, played on a giant screen before the jury. The courtroom held its breath. Darius looked down. When Naomi took the stand, not a single keyboard clicked. Not a breath was heard. She spoke clearly, steadily, but each word was like a scalpel slicing through Darius's mask. He didn't hit me with his hands. He hit me with words. Every, "You're overreacting." Every glare when I voiced my opinion. He locked me out of our accounts every time and said, "I'm just helping." That was abuse, and I lived in it. For 3 years. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to say, I'm not afraid anymore. After the lunch recess, with all of America holding its breath for what would come next, something unexpected happened. A former Darius Malik Grant employee sent a public email to the court, Clarice, and 10 major media outlets. Contents: Darius had once forced Malik to forge a signature on architectural designs to secure funding from an international NGO. An audio recording of Darius saying, "Just sign it. Who cares? Naomi will cover it like she always does." The courtroom erupted. Clarice immediately motioned to expand the investigation to include criminal financial fraud. In a separate press room, Clarice Morgan addressed the media. "We're not just divorcing a man. We're exposing a system that uses love to manipulate women's finances and reputations." When asked, what would Naomi say to those following her story? Naomi stood up, looked straight into the camera, eyes unblinking. If you're in a relationship where you have to shrink for the other person to grow, that's not love. That's invasion. Wearing velvet gloves, and you have the right to take those gloves off. Within 24 hours, the hashtag #velvetglove abuse became a global trend. Thousands of women began sharing their stories. No blood, no bruises, just fractures in their spirit. And Naomi, she was no longer a wife. She had become a symbol. New York State Court. Monday morning, the air was thick like the sky, just before a storm. Reporters crowded outside, cameras, pens, and live streams buzzing across platforms. The entire nation watched, waiting to see, would justice truly be named in the divorce that shook the world of finance? Naomi arrived wearing a deep, ocean blue suit. Her hair was neatly tied back. No jewelry. In her hand, a single photocopied sheet, a personal check reading, "Reclaiming my freedom, $0, 000. On the other side stood Darius Langston, but he looked like a different man. Sunken eyes, a wrinkled suit. The arrogance is gone. He wasn't flanked by his lead attorney anymore. Clarice had escalated the case to include criminal charges. Now he had 2 replacement lawyers but no allies, no friends, no supporters, no audience. When the judge entered, all rose. Naomi did not tremble. She did not look away. She was ready for the final chapter of a 3-year nightmare. After reviewing the presented evidence, the judge began. The court finds that Mr. Darius Langston has severely violated financial and ethical obligations within the marriage. Psychological abuse account, manipulation, and deliberate financial deceit are confirmed. The ruling. All of Naomi Ellis's personal and corporate assets would remain untouched. Darius was ordered to repay $1.8 million unlawfully withdrawn from their joint accounts. A federal investigation was to be opened regarding fraud in affordable housing contracts he bid on. All of Darius's claims for property division and financial entitlement were dismissed entirely. This is not just a legal victory. It is a warning. Reputation cannot protect a man who betrays trust. After the trial, Darius tried to approach Naomi. "Naomi, it didn't have to go this far. I still think we could fix this." Naomi stopped. She looked him square in the eye. "You had 3 years to fix it, but all you did was polish your toxicity until it looked like love. I don't need to fix you. I needed to be free from you." She turned and walked away. I never looked back. That night, CNN opened with the headline, "Naomi Ellis, victim or pioneer?" And 5 minutes in came the answer. "No one has to choose. She is both, And now she leads. A viral clip showed Naomi exiting the courthouse, sunlight pouring over her face as she stopped and said, "I didn't need to win a case. I needed to reclaim the right to define my worth. And today I did." So, Darius' multiple contracts collapsed. Sponsors pulled out. A Forbes article on the humanitarian architect was quietly deleted. He was summoned for a federal investigation. Naomi invited to speak at Harvard on the soft power of women in financial systems. Featured on the cover of Essence magazine with the headline, "Naomi Ellis, From Marital Darkness to the Light of Justice." That night, Naomi returned to her new apartment. Not large, not luxurious, but entirely hers. She opened her laptop and clicked the first tab. A digital platform for the foundation she launched, supporting women financially manipulated in relationships. The Second Signature. Named after the moment she signed her divorce papers with her non-dominant hand. A declaration that even when one side of her trust was paralyzed, she still stood steady. Each day, hundreds of women wrote in. And Naomi knew. She hadn't just left a marriage. She had opened a door for thousands to step out of cages that had no bars. 3 months after the trial, Naomi's name appeared everywhere in the media. Not as the ex-wife of Darius Langston, but as the founder of the Second Signature, a foundation dedicated to helping women who had suffered financial abuse. The first office was on the 5th floor of an old building in Brooklyn. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough to begin a revolution. On the main wall, a slogan was painted boldly, "Sign your name again, this time for yourself." Naomi worked 14 hours a day. No reporters, no glamour. Only hundreds of emails each week from women who had once been drained of every cent, told, "You don't need to work, just be obedient. Let me handle the money. You wouldn't understand finance. Everything is mine. I'm the one who built it." One of the first emails Naomi would never forget. "I'm a nurse. My husband takes my entire monthly paycheck, only giving me grocery money. After learning to split accounts from your post, I just managed to pull out $50. I'm not stopping here. Jasmine. T. Chicago." Naomi printed it out and pinned it on the wall. Just one A4 sheet, one small step, but to her, it was a crack in the wall of silence. The Second Signature grew rapidly. It partnered with 3 major banks to open emergency anonymous accounts for women under financial control. It trained 42 young attorneys willing to offer pro bono legal help, and it created a network of silent sisters. Each woman who withdrew her first bit of financial freedom would help the next one do the same. Naomi no longer just told her own story. She created the opening chapters of thousands of others. One Saturday afternoon, Naomi accepted an invitation to speak at a global women's financial rights summit. She walked onto the stage, holding the mic with her left hand, still symbolic of the Second Signature. She said, "I once believed that silence was the way to keep peace, but I've come to realize silence is where manipulators grow their deepest roots. Today, I'm here, not because I'm special, but because I chose to break the silence before it swallowed me whole." Backstage, a young woman approached her, about 22 years old, wearing a cheap shirt, eyes uncertain but full of hope. "Ms. Ellis, I withdrew $82 from my husband's account last night. I'm on a bus from Kansas to get here. I don't know what to do next, but I knew I had to go." Naomi smiled and reached out her hand. "What you just did was more complicated than signing divorce papers. You are not alone." That evening, Naomi returned to her new apartment, a place where she chose the furniture, she signed the lease, and she paid every penny with her own money. She looked into the mirror. There were no more scars from her past marriage, only a woman, calm, powerful, and deeply engaged in redefining what it means to begin again. On her desk sat an international registration application for the Second Signature. Next destination, Nairobi. The plane landed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, bathed in Nairobi's bright sunlight. Naomi Ellis didn't come here for leisure. She came at the invitation of a local NGO in a community where over 60% of women had never owned a bank account in their name. In the back seat of an old Toyota, Naomi looked out through the dusty glass as the streets of Nairobi moved vividly. Mothers selling vegetables under the harsh sun, children tying their books together with plastic strings, and curious glances when they saw a Black American woman in a white shirt step into the Kibera Legal Aid Center. The room was barely 20 square meters. No projector, no air conditioning. Just 17 women sitting close together, quietly waiting. The translator introduced Naomi. No embellishments, just simply. She once had her money taken by her husband, was isolated from her family, and was called useless. But now she teaches others how to break free. Naomi nodded in greeting, then reached into her handbag and pulled out an old leather notebook. She opened to the first page, which once held her first secret expense log. One woman raised her hand, voice trembling. "Sister, I can't read, but I still want to know how I can hide away a little money for myself." Naomi smiled and closed the notebook gently. "I once couldn't even read my own emotions, but I learned. And now we'll learn together." 3 days later, Kenyan newspapers reported Black American woman helps Kibera women open their first bank accounts using fingerprints instead of signatures. But Naomi didn't speak to the press. She sat inside a tin-roofed room, holding a small paper savings book, and handed it to a 34-year-old single mother, a woman who had just hidden 200 shillings for the first time after 12 years with a controlling husband. A week later, Naomi received a call from the United Nations in New York. "We'd like you to serve as a special advisor on financial rights for minority women and to share your journey at the Geneva Summit." Naomi looked out her apartment window. The sunset spilled over the Manhattan skyline. She was no longer the woman with cake thrown at her face for daring to say no. No longer a shadow beside a powerful man with a fake persona. She was Naomi Ellis, the woman who rekindled her flame and then used it to light the path for others. That night, she live-streamed for the first time on social media. No filters, no professional lighting, just her real face and a calm voice. "If you hear me and feel weak, please know you are not alone. I was once told I was nothing without my husband. But today I have 5 million women learning to sign their names again." The video received 12 million views in 48 hours. The hashtag second signature went viral. A week later, at a cozy celebration for the first anniversary of the Naomi Foundation, her best friend Angela raised a glass. Naomi didn't just leave that marriage to survive. She left it to live again with a greater purpose. Naomi smiled gently. No tears, no outburst, because she knew the women who once stayed silent. We are now learning to speak, and maybe the first voice they hear is their own. Naomi didn't just win a divorce. She reclaimed the right to live by her worth and passed that power on to millions more.